Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our VWV Workplace Compass podcast. My name is Jess. I'm a legal director and a knowledge lawyer here at VWV. And today I am joined by two of my colleagues, Kiki, Dawes and Naseem. Nabi, welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hi, Jess.
So Kiki, you've joined us before on the podcast, but Naseem, this is your first time. So would you both like to give a little introduction for our listeners?
Yes, so I'm Kiki and I work in the employment team here as a partner, and I specialise in the education sector.
Naseem?
And similar to Kiki, I also specialise with the education team. I've been at the firm for 20 years, a partner in the employment team.
Wonderful, and thanks both for joining us. So today then, and over the next few episodes, we are going to be talking about the new Fair Work Agency. So we're going to look at what it is, what it's going to do, and crucially, why employers should care about it and what actions they should be taking now in some important areas. So listeners, do like and subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on our future episodes. Right, so let's get going. Naseem, do you want to kick us off with a brief summary of what the Fair Work Agency is and why it's been introduced?
Of course, thanks, Jess. So, the Fair Work Agency, it's a new enforcement body established under the Employment Rights Act 2025. Its role is to bring together a number of existing labour market enforcement functions and to introduce some new areas of enforcement. It replaces three existing labour market enforcement agencies, and that's the HMRC's National Minimum Wage Unit, the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority, and the Employment Agency Standards Inspectorate. As well as taking over enforcement responsibilities for these three agencies, it also is going to be given new enforcement powers in areas including statutory sick pay and holiday pay compliance. And then in due course, it will become responsible for the Employment Tribunal penalty enforcement process too.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the things that occurred to me when I was reading up about the Fair Work Agency is that it feels like quite a significant step change in how employment rights are going to be enforced going forward, because we're of course already familiar with state enforcement, HMRC enforcement in areas such as national minimum wage compliance. But apart from that, for the most part, employment rights historically rely on enforcement by individuals themselves through employment tribunal claims. And I think that the creation of the Fair Work Agency seems to signal a move towards a more active role for essentially the state in the enforcement of workforce rights. And Kiki, I wonder, do you think that that's a fair comment?
Yes, I do. I think that's right. The government's view is that relying solely on individual workers to enforce their rights has limitations. Some workers might be reluctant to bring claims, they might not know their rights, or they might simply not want to engage in litigation. And the Fair Work Agency is intended to create a more proactive enforcement model with greater emphasis on the intelligence gathering, inspections, and direct enforcement action.
And I think that's a really important point for employers. The risk is no longer just that an individual worker brings a claim. In some areas, employers will increasingly be dealing with a regulator, and that has its own enforcement powers and can investigate potential non-compliance itself. And that's a marked difference, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Kiki, then turning to you, do you want to take us through what we know so far about how the Fair Work Agency is going to operate?
Sure. So we know that it's going to be an arm's length executive agency of the Department for Business and Trade, which basically means it will have its own budget and management structure, but not its entity. So, having taken over the three existing bodies Naseem just mentioned, it'll have around 600 inspectors working for it nationally. It's going to be chaired by Matthew Taylor, who led the Taylor Review, which was an independent review of working practices back in 2017. It will have an advisory body with representatives from business, trade unions, and independent experts sitting on it. It will be required to produce an enforcement strategy every 3 years, which should provide useful insight into what the key areas of focus will be and how those may develop over time.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's also worth mentioning that it is also going to have the power to bring employment tribunal proceedings itself on behalf of workers, where the worker could bring a claim but appears not to be doing so. And that's quite an interesting new concept. It's not yet clear exactly how that's going to work in relation to the areas which are within its separate enforcement powers remit. But I think that's certainly something to keep an eye on.
Yes, definitely. I think that that's quite an unusual power. Like you say, it remains to be seen how often it will be used in practice, particularly where the agency may also have direct enforcement powers of its own. But it does underline the government's intention to create a more interventionist regulator.
I agree. It's also worth remembering the legislation allows additional rights to be brought within the Fair Work Agency's remit over time. So what we're seeing now may not be the final shape of the agency. Its role could well be expanded significantly in future years. Time will tell.
So, Naseem, in terms of the enforcement powers themselves, what do we think those might look like?
I think they're likely to be quite broad. At one end of the spectrum, the agency will have the powers to provide guidance, issue warning letters, and require remedial steps of employers. It will also have powers to investigate suspected breaches, require information and documents to be produced, for example, enter premises in certain circumstances, and issue financial penalties. In more serious cases, I suppose, it will also be able to seek enforcement undertakings and orders, likely bring civil proceedings and support criminal prosecutions. So it's much more than simply another advisory body. It is intended to be quite a significant regulator.
And the other thing which I think it's interesting to understand is that the Fair Work Agency is intended to be a single place where both workers and employers can go to for help. So one of its stated objectives is to resolve issues by supporting employers to achieve legal compliance.
And that theme runs through a lot of the government's material. The agency's first year priorities include improving the accessibility of guidance, making it easier for employers to navigate their obligations, and reducing unnecessary regulatory burdens.
So, the agency clearly has got quite a lot to be getting on with. I think it's probably fair to say. Do we know much about the resources it's going to have at its disposal to deliver on these plans?
Well, that's a big question, and it's a significant one. Well, the government has given the agency a budget of just over 60 million for the year 26 to 27, and that's an increase in the combined budget of its predecessor enforcement bodies. But it remains to be seen just how far that budget will go in the context of all that the agency is trying to achieve.
And at the same time, the agency is still in its first year of operation. So a lot of the focus at the moment is on building the foundations for the future. The government strategic document makes it clear that this year is really about bringing the different enforcement functions together and preparing for a much larger role then in the years ahead.
There's also a real strong emphasis on public awareness and stakeholder engagement. The government wants the agency to become a recognisable organisation that workers know how to access and employers know how to engage with. And at the same time, it's preparing to take over responsibility for national minimum wage enforcement and to commence holiday pay enforcement.
Yeah, and those are two areas that are likely to be particularly relevant for employers, of course.
Absolutely. National minimum wage compliance is already a significant enforcement priority, and holiday and pay enforcement will become increasingly important, I think, as the agency's remit expands. So, both areas have the potential to create substantial financial exposure for employers who get things wrong.
So, if there's one takeaway from today's discussion, what would it be?
Well, for me, Jess, it's that the Fair Work Agency is about much more than simply bringing together a few existing enforcement bodies. It really does represent a shift towards a more state-led approach to enforcing employment rights.
And for employers specifically, I think that means thinking about compliance in a broader way. The agency is being designed to support employers who want to do the right thing, but it will also, as we've seen, have significant powers to investigate and take action where it identifies non compliance.
Great. And I think that's a good place to leave things for this episode. Next time, we are going to take a closer look at national minimum wage enforcement, some of the most common compliance mistakes we see in practice, and what employers should be doing now to reduce risk. So thanks both very much for joining me.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jess.
No worries. And thanks everybody for listening. Please do like and subscribe if you found this episode useful, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon for the next instalment of our Fair Work Agency Workplace Compass series.
Bye.
Bye.